Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu salam ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Salamu alaikum. Rahmatullah barakatuh lil ikhwani hawati fi din. Wassalamu ala mani tabahuda lil ikhwani hawati fi Africa, Europa, wa America, the Caribbean, wa kulli makan. On drama, my dear brothers and sisters in the full-week community, continuing on the talk about the Sahel region. But this here is a little bit different in the sense that I'm going to be covering about the insurgencies that are popping up all over Africa. And I'm going to give you a map as a general guide to show you how encompassing this jihad is and how serious it is. And it should not be taken for granted. And one of the most important factors of the excuse me. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just looking at something here. One of the most important factors of all of this is that we lost sight on the causes of the insurgency. And a lot of times we give some cursory, we have some, our historians full of scholars and historians who give us a kind of a backdrop on some of the problems that has happened. And then we have now on the ground, we have some of my fellow brothers and sisters who are on the ground who are sharing pictures and writing about what is happening in their villages and in their areas where they're living. So this has been a big help as well. And I talk about this issue, but we know, and I have to clear this out again, we know that the enemy does not want no one talking. The first thing programs like this are Fulani scholars, are Fulani historians. They bring up issues like this. We have esteemed statesmen, African, who talk about issues like this because we all want the same thing. We want peace. They call this terrorism because we expose them, the Western governments in particular, and they don't want to be exposed. So since they control the media and so forth, they paint us as terrorists. See, so I'm going to continue to talk about this because even though I live in Morocco right now, Morocco is concerned. Our government has made comments about this. They're concerned about what's happening in the Sahel region in particular because it's very close. It's only a couple hours away, our brothers and sisters, in an airplane. It's not far. It's not far. And these groups now are right almost literally on the back door of Morocco. So we're all concerned about this. It's just that we just don't know how to quell it because using a bullet, it doesn't work because it's like spilling gasoline into a smoldering fire. It's starting to spread. And more gasoline they pour in it because this is what the West is offering us is gasoline. They figured the best way to do it is to put gasoline on the problem and it spreads. And these are Jewish and Tubab economics and economists and so forth and others who talk about the Americans, in particular the British, they profit off insurgencies because why? The American companies then rev up their weapons production. Armed dealers rev up their production to sell arms. The armed dealers sell arms to the Mujahideen group. The Western powers sell their arms to the fledgling African and Muslim governments. You see how this is a big business. Then campaigns to recruit, to give you a job, is also in the mix. See, so the outside of Africa, they're looking at it as an investment opportunity. They don't care about you, and they use black and Afro Arab faces to do the fighting for them. They don't muddy themselves, and when they do, they get spanked, as what has happened in Niger, what has happened in Mali, what has happened in Burkina Faso. Malcolm El-Hajj said that the Americans back in the 60s will not be able to win any more ground wars. They're going to have to use everything by air. And this is true, because when they come on the ground, yes, they get little victories here and there, and they show movies of they've done this, they have done certain things here and there, but they have not been able to win a ground war anymore. And it's almost virtually impossible in Africa to do it, because it's too big, it is too massive, and the terrain, you have tropical climate, you have savanna type climate, you have the Saharan type climate. Then you go up into the north, you have cold. I mean, it gets cold in the winter. You'd be surprised how cold as you go up to elevations. It snows. And even in the city of Fez, we have had snow here 3 or 4 times. And since I've been here, I've been almost 2 decades. So, these issues like this, we want to talk about it, because we should educate our brothers and sisters about what's going on in Africa, in the Sahel region. What's going on with the Muslims? What is happening? Why we have so many insurgencies? Because when you pick up the LA Times, you pick up the New York Times or the Washington Post, they'll give you cursory. They call us jihadists. Every Muslim, I don't care if you worship according to the way the Prophet Islam has told you to worship, you are now a jihadist, or the Americans say, co-conspirator. You should be indicted, and all this. And yet still, brothers and sisters, what is so funny about their charges of terrorism and criminality on our part, but yet and still, no, that's funny. I don't see it here. Oh, no, wait a minute. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Now, what do we call this? Now, I have never been in any public forum. I have never been any place where I go to train fighters to go in the United States to kill or to try to overthrow the government. I don't know not one Fulani or any of the African scholars training insurgents to go into the United States to kill. Not one. None of us go to shake the hands of the Tubab in this country and then we go and try to overthrow him. None of us. None of us, I know any Africans I know of, any scholars, go to the United States and try to change their culture by telling them not to accept homosexuality. You see the hypocrisy here, brothers and sisters. But yet still, the Americans don't want that. Rightfully so. That's their border. This is their lifestyle. This is their culture. If they want whoredom, they want to drink, smoke, this is their right. But yet and still, they won't give us our rights here. They take our rights from us by trying to force us to live according to what they want. And so these are some of the essences, brothers and sisters, why we have a massive insurgency. This insurgency is no joke. Look at this, brothers and sisters. Look at this map. Now you have, I'll get into this part here. The green that you see here now, you remember here a couple of weeks back, I showed you my proposal to stop the cross-border raids, the insurgency and whatnot of trying to take over these governments. Okay, I proposed this Emirate Islamia, which is in the green here, for them to have as their homeland. I proposed that. And I said this is the last resort, in that if we cannot come to terms and if we find that the Mujahideen are to the point where they can capture a large amount of land and so forth, this will stop this. See, but here's the problem, brothers and sisters. Nobody is stopping them now. They keep throwing gasoline into the fire. And what I suspect, in my interpretation, what I suspect, and what the historical significance of, because I'm a historian as well, the green will be a new emirate, and it'll be taken by the sword, brothers and sisters. Look how big it is. Look how big this emirate would be by taking, and they're inch by inch, every day, they're gaining more and more territory in the Sahel region. You're talking about the Tuareg. I won't give the names of these groups because then they will say that I'm over glorifying them. Because, of course, I'm over talking about the historical factor. I'm talking about them who's causing the insurgencies and so forth. They want to call the brothers, the Muslim brothers, the Fulani and everybody else terrorists. But yet still, what about them? They have not terrorized the Iraqis or the Afghans. They've terrorized. We don't consider them equal players at all. So since they want to call us names and so forth and so on and designate these names so they can kill us outright, we have the right to talk about them. And this is what we're doing because they're the catalyst of what has happened. And you look at this map, brothers and sisters, how serious it is. The green is the emirate that could happen. It could be 2 years, 3 years down the road, or far less, because these Mujahideen groups, they're the Tuareg, you have the Arabs, you have the Fulani, all are involved in this. And they're gaining recruits as we speak today, and they're starting to take over territories. This is what I suspect if they don't do the right thing in a couple of years. The green, there will be a new emirate. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about Mauritania. We're talking about some parts maybe of Senegal. We're talking about Mali will fall. Burkina Faso, Niger will fall. That's a massive, massive stretch of land that covers almost the United States. That's how big this emirate would be, brothers and sisters. The yellow you see here, again, the yellow up here in the north is these are insurgencies that they have, but they're not, they are a variety of Mujahideen groups and others, secular groups and so forth and so on. Algeria, no, they have a Mujahideen group there. And also, you know what's happened in the Morocco region where I live. We have a dispute, and you know it's before the UN, it's before the AU. I won't get deep into that because it's not the forum for that. But they have a section of the community who wants to break away, but this is not the forum for that. But these are not quote unquote Mujahideen soldiers because they don't have the equipment, nor the means, nor the motivation to take on the Moroccan government, and they would need help. And this would cause a serious backlash upon them. They're not Mujahideen. They're not even, for what I understand, they're not even Muslims. But regardless of that, I'm just giving you, we have hotspots everywhere, but they're not hot enough for me to list them on this map. The yellow here at the top, far north, is Tunis. Tunis is a small country, but it has Mujahideen soldiers in it who want to topple the government because of what has happened. You have Libya, you know, when they killed Gaddafi. Now it's Mujahideen all over the place in Libya and secular groups as well. And you have each one is funded. The Muslim countries are funding some of the Mujahideen groups. Some of the Western countries are funding the secular groups to take over. It's a mess in Libya. And then you look over to your right, to the north. To your right is in Arabic we call Messer, ancient Egyptian language. They call this Kemt. This is the name they called Egypt at the time, Kemt. And you look at this, they have one major Mujahideen group that is serious, who made pledge to remember the old, not old, but they weren't debunked yet, but the IS that was in Jazir al-Arab, in Syria and Iraq and so forth, so on. They made pledge to them. This group here is causing a lot of problems in Messer for many years now, and they're a serious bunch of Mujahideen group. So, but they're not able to create a emirate. You see all in the yellow, they're not equipped with the manpower to do and make an emirate. Go to your right here, now to East Africa. We got Somaliland. Somaliland, we have Somali. We have Eritrea. We have parts of Sudan. And Sudan, matter of fact, is in grips into a bloody struggle that's going on. The Mujahideen are taking advantage of that. It's bloody, brothers and sisters. See, this is why I'm saying, do you know how much money it would take for the United States alone in itself to come into Africa to try to clean it up? They cannot. They cannot do it, brothers and sisters. They need black faces to go to fight other black men to fight and die for their cause. That's the only way. And they'll pay them cursory amount of money. That's the only way it's going to work. But you see this map. Let's go further down to as we leave East Africa. Now let's go down to the south. Look at the southwest in the red. Mozambique. They reached there. It started to go upwards and a little bit over to the west. You see what I'm talking about? How deadly these insurgencies are, brothers and sisters. And again, you have the same formula, brothers and sisters, the same formula of gasoline been thrown onto a fire, which it shouldn't have been. It should have been. They should have worked something out, but they didn't. They used the model that the Americans used, and now they got full-fledged insurgencies. And you look over now. Let's go over to the west, a little bit north of where you see East Africa, Mozambique here on your right hand. And now let's go over a little bit to your left. You see it red there. The Cameroons. The Cameroons are embarked in a lot of action in part of the Congo as well with Mujahideen, because what has happened? The Cameroons embark into maybe a split. You have the English-speaking ones who are Muslim, a lot of Muslims, and then you have the French-speaking, right? So you see who's fueling that. Mujahideen, fi sabilillah, are now in Cameroon, and they're fighting along with a notorious other group, from northern Nigeria. I don't even want to mention their name. They also have been making border raids and also have been doing their business inside the Cameroons. It's in red. You see, brothers and sisters, how complex it is, how deadly it is. It's nothing to play about. I talk about it because all of us should be well-rounded in our education. If you're Muslim, Jew, or Christian, it makes no difference, because you have human suffering. You have people who are taken to the deserts. You have people who are now fighting for a reason. And the reasons are not like what LA Times say or the Washington Post. They'll say that the black people are deranged or they're not right in their head. But they don't talk about their government is instrumental in causing these things, brothers and sisters. And it's true. They're instrumental in causing that. So we have to call it out and say for what it is, brothers and sisters, because we can't how can I say it? We can't just go after the African leaders and the Mujahideen groups without punishing the West as well, because the West is flaming this by throwing gasoline into a fire. So let's get started on this now. Brothers and sisters, we're talking some technical stuff here. Okay, I'm getting down to the basic essence of what is happening. Of course, the West will say this is terrorism. And now you've heard your brother talk. It's funny. As you see, as I said before, what I'm doing, they say terrorism. Who am I terrorizing? That's funny, isn't it? Let's look at terror. Who am I terrorizing? I'm not terrorizing anybody, but I'm exposing the West for what they're doing and what they're doing here on my continent. So now let's go to this. Let's look back at the 7/11 to the present. The jihad has not changed, brothers and sisters. You heard me say this. From the 7/11 to about the 1300s, the Fulani in particular, and along with their Mandinka brothers, Bambara brothers, the Seneca brothers, a whole host of brothers, okay, in the Senegambia region, the Hausa brothers, they have been engaged in some forms of jihad. But it did not gain any fanfare until about the 1300s. But in between that, we know what's happened in Andalusia. You heard me explain this many times. I won't get deep into that. but this jihad has been smoldering, okay, building up. Morocco was built upon jihad, and the country was formed basically based upon Islamic model. We know that. And they came and they kicked butt, and they made Morocco, not this Morocco we see today. It was much larger. There's no Algeria. There was no Mauritania. You got to remember that, brother. There was no Tunis either. All this was called Al-Maghrib, meaning the West. All of that area. And part of Libya, as we see it today, was part of all of what is called Al-Maghrib. So they were instrumental in creating these sultanates in that region. It was the 1300s that it became very, very powerful because they created the sultanates, again, remember, in West Africa. And so we've had those, and I want to cover, we have so many personalities that we can cover, ancestral brothers we can cover, who were involved in these jihads, who created emirates. Some were lasted 10 years, some 50 years, some 5 years. But I want to cover that, inshallah ta'ala, bi'ithnillah. Now, here, I'm going to give you some of the nuts and bolts because I want you to think about these things. Brothers and sisters, this here is a major, major factor. It is arrogance deluxe. I'll give you equation to this. It's like in the American sports, a boxer. Okay, like we had our famous Muhammad Ali. We had some others, but especially Muhammad Ali, Rahmatullah alayh. And he would broadcast to tell everybody what he was going to do. He said, look, I'm going to do this. I'm going to knock the man out in 3 rounds. Or I'm going to hit him in this way. I'm going to use this type of style to fight him. See? The Americans in particular are doing the same thing, and the French also. They come arrogantly and to announce they're going to start to build super bases, mega bases all through Africa, especially West Africa. The rank and file Africans from Morocco all the way across the Sahel region, North Africa, Central, wherever they may be, don't want it. They don't want this. Because when they're already here, but when they bring and create these bases, they bring their sexual mores with them. And they begin to tear the country down even more under democratic ways and means. You say, well, I don't understand what you mean. They start wanting to introduce. Now the Africans are all over the news agencies here talking about they were offering money. I mean, in the millions for African states to accept homosexuality, to legislate and protect it and open up tourism for it. So Africa will be a homosexual playground where the deviants can come into Africa and do what they want under the homosexual connotation and banner. You see what I'm talking about? So one of the biggest factors is the Americans announcing they're going to build a base here. They're going to build a base here. They're going to build a base here. And they're going to use this to go to fight the Mujahideen soldiers. But who's going to do most of the fighting? It's going to be black faces who will be fighting their brothers. Brothers and sisters, let me say this to you again. The problem we have in Africa is between African people. We cannot solve these problems because the Tuba governments always inflame by throwing gasoline on the problem. The rank and file Africans don't want the Americans or the British or the French here. Oh, tourism, they don't care because the African people or black people in general are introvert. I mean, they are universal. They are accepting of everybody. And they don't harbor this racial hatred that you find among the Tuba population. We just don't have that. We've grown to hate them based upon what they have done to us, not because of race and color. Theirs is different. They have, for thousands of years, have hated us because of color and race and what we represent and how we can breed them out so they have their hatred towards us. See, so there's a big difference in the way we look at them and the way they look at us. But this factor here, brothers and sisters, we cannot underestimate, because when Americans announce this, it activates these mujahideen groups. Brothers and sisters, they activate this. Now, let's go back here. We have to give our brothers and sisters a backdrop on the situation in the Sahel region, West Africa in particular. Because why? The Islamic conquest is still front and center today, and why the West is trying to stop it. They, even though they were under the colonial period, it was still smoldering in the background. They want to stamp out Islam, they can't. It's growing. So they issued two measures to stop it. It didn't work. The Afro-Arabs came into the region, and as you heard me say many times, and brought the Islam to the Fulbe community, my community, the Fuller people. And they came in peace. And so the first round of conversions were done by trade delegations. There was cross trade coming from the north, trading salt and so forth and so on. And then the brothers were trading in milk products, trading in spices and so forth and so on. You see what I mean? And so this is how, and they begin to watch the Afro-Arabs, the Afro-Amazigh, and the Afro-Tuareg, and watch their habits to see how they were, operating. And they began to come to Islam. The Fulbe community, because they sit in the southern fringes of the Sahara. So they were contacted first. And as you heard me talk about, many of these things happened, and the Fulani were convinced, and they came in Islam in droves, as you know. So we go back to the 7-11 and conquest, that jihad, that the Fulani in particular. But you see here, we got the Amazigh, we got the Tuareg, we have the Bambara, we have the Wolof, we have the Hapular, we have the Mandinka, we have the Senike. I mean, I could go on and on. All of them participated in that, in this jihad. And they conquered most of Spain, as I explained to you before. From this time to the present, the Fulla have been in jihad with the sword. Yes, brothers and sisters, you understand the retaliation by the West and by our African brothers against the Fulla community has been stemming, because in the early parts from the 7-11 all the way across into near the 18th century, the Fulla people were kicking butt. Okay, and everybody knows that. And I mean, they created sultanates after sultanates. When they were defeated, they became part of another sultanate, and maybe the Mandinka would take over, like our ancestral brother Samari Toure, who I want to talk about him, inshallah. He had a great respect for the Fulla people, and I want to read a letter one of these days about what he said. It's very interesting, because he quelled a fight between Muslims, and what he said was beautiful, the wording. But he was a great mujahid, Samari Toure. I even named my second oldest son after him. And so this jihad has taken place by the sword for a long time, since 7-11, and it continue on today. Now, let's get into this, brothers and sisters, okay? Let's get into this thing about the jihad. And what has happened in this region here that is causing the problem. When you have Muslims, Fulla or Hausa, I don't care where they are, Kampele, they could be Mandinka, Wolof, Seneke, they could be many different groups, and they're Muslims. The jihad sometimes can be offensive, which we had in the 13th century in particular. 13th century to the 18th century, the jihad was offensive. They were taking areas and they were creating sultanates, and these sultanates were being governed under Sharia Allah Ta'ala. Now let's go fast forward to modern times. The jihad that you see today more or less has been reactionary and defensive in nature. Because why? The security forces, as you heard me say, now you understand the Americans, what the Americans are doing, paying and training militias and security forces to go attack the Fula, to attack the Tuareg, to attack the Amazigh, to attack the Mendika, to attack the Hausa, okay? Or vice versa, to train them into this. And so their jihad has become reactionary because of what has happened to them. You saw what I showed you here, brothers and sisters. Remember this. Look, this is a baby cattle. The baby here was slaughtered, and the village is burnt out. And this is what I was talking about in this sense. So they became reactionary. The men of the village come and they get together, and then they go join groups, so they form new groups. This is what has happened in the Sahel. We have established groups, Fulani Mujahideen groups. Now we have a whole bunch of other smaller ones. They're more fledgling in that they don't have the support and they don't have the weaponry as some of the major ones who have weapons and desert vehicles and so forth and so on. But this is a reactionary jihad to what has happened to them. And we have the same formula, brothers and sisters. I don't care if it's in the Sahel region. I don't care if it's in North Africa. I don't care if it's in East Africa. I don't care if it's in Southwest Africa or it's over in the Cameroons. We have the same formula. The results of gross injustices and wanton murder. These things here cause it's major catalyst to these insurgencies we know today, brothers and sisters. Okay, this is a simple fact. It is an unfortunate situation. But when you have people who, matter of fact, I was talking to a brother, me and him was talking about this because I'm not living in this, in this arena and this war zone. I'm not living in it. But a question was asked about this issue. And he asked me, he said, look, Yahya, I'm here in my village here. I went to work. I get a phone call. And I live about 30 miles away. I mean, my work is 30 miles away. And my village is being attacked. By the time I get there, he said, it took about 30 minutes, 35 minutes. It was already burnt out. Many people were killed. Some of the full of women ravished. And what was happening basically almost to his friend's daughter, who was 16 years old, is unimaginable for a father to have to endure what has happened to his daughter, who was virginal at 16. Is no longer virgin anymore. She's not. And so he said, what would you do? Would you stand and wait for them to keep coming back to you? Because he said, normally they do. They'll come to burn you out and they'll see you rebuilding. They'll come to burn you out again. So these gross injustices here is a catalyst, brothers and sisters. It's a major catalyst. These three types of aforementioned jihad in the cause of Allah is instrumental and paramount to the current insurgencies arising through Africa. Brothers and sisters, we have to do something. We have to pray. We have to see if we get some statesmen to come to mediate and to quell all the violence that's happening on our continent. We have to have that. And it's not going to be done by the Tubab. They don't want the Tubab involved. Because we know what they have done for 40 years. Their dirty work, handiwork has been nothing but evil. Bottom line, let's look at it for what it is. Under their tutelage, what have we seen? We still have poverty, a lot. And we have strife. We have all kinds of things. Look at our governments, how weak they are. See? Look how weak, because they're trusting their Western powers, handlers, to do everything for them and to find remedies and stuff like this. It's not going to work. The economic system, the Western system is not good. Don't join any African group that specifies using the Western model economic group. It doesn't work, brothers and sisters. If it worked, we'll be flourishing very well here on this continent, but it's not. We enter the markets of the Tubab markets across the world, and what happens? You see, the money fails. We have this happen. The banks close. Look what's happening in the United States. See, so these types of things here is paramount to the current insurgencies arising all through Africa. These jihads are driven now by the sword, brothers and sisters. We can say that because of what has happened. Since no one will protect them, they said, okay, we're going to put our own form of governance in. We're going to put our own economic system under the Sharia law. And they begin to take vast territories in order to protect themselves. If they have their own people governing, they don't have no more raids from the Tuba who dropping bombs on them. They don't have no more militias coming in and burning out and ravishing our full daughters and Tuareg daughters and so forth and so on like they do. See, so that will stop that. And the spread of Islam basically still, though, in Africa is being done by invitation. People watch Muslims. They go to school with our sons, and then they say, hey, I want to be Muslim. So the vast majority of converts to Islam in Africa is still by peaceful means. This jihad is not trying to convert you to Islam. This jihad here is saying, I'm going to take Mali. I'm going to take Burkina Faso. I'm going to take Nigeria, and I'm going to make it into an emirate under the Sharia law. So that way I can live under the Subhanahu wa Ta'ala's governance. And that way I protect myself from the democratic ways and means. I protect myself from the Tubab government, Western powers. I protect myself against the hypocrite, traitorous African leaders who back up the Western forces, who are enriched and empowered by them. They said, no more. We can't stand this no more. So we'll take over these areas, as we talked about, as I said before. And again, let's look at this. This emirate here in the green is massive. The Tuareg, if you listen to the Tuareg Mujahideen groups, you listen to the Arab groups, you listen to the Fula groups, they all are saying the same thing. They want this emirate, and they want to take it, and they want to take, and talking about Mali, parts of Mauritania. They're stretching maybe a little bit into Senegal, across over as you go to the west, in the green, you go into Burkina Faso, and then you go to Nigeria. Now, this is something I did not talk about, and I'll talk about it at this time. You see this area in the blue, brothers and sisters? This is northern Nigeria. They are already under the Sharia. You notice something. They're not red. They're not marked in green. They're not marked in yellow. Because one of the greatest calling cards that the Mujahideen, fi sabilillah, regardless of where they're at, is the Sharia. In northern Nigeria, I'm not saying it's perfect, but they practice the Sharia. So they cannot annex it because it's already under the Sharia. You see? So there's no need, because what excuse do they have? Because they have Islamic courts, they have Hezbollah police, you have women, you have Christians that live there, and Jews, Hebrews who live among the Muslims, you have that. But the land is governed by the northern region is governed by the Sharia. So that region basically, even though we have one notorious Mujahideen group, which I don't call them Mujahideen, they're just Harabs, they're just fighters now, kidnappers and Muharaba. Yes, they're fighting with them because they want them to be more radicalized and so forth and so on. But you see that area is not going to be annexed because they're already under the Sharia. I wanted to make that point because I want you to see the distinction. Northern Nigeria is operating under the Sharia. So you don't hear the Mujahideen groups talking about taking this region over because it's under the Sharia already. That's right, brothers and sisters. Now, do you see the inference here? See, do you see the inference here now? The Sharia law is a catalyst to stopping the Mujahideen groups. See, so I show you another map, an English map, so you get a better picture. You look down here in the southwest, you see Mozambique. It's down here in the blue, I believe it's, yeah, I think it's in the blue here, in the southwest of the map. If Mozambique decided to become an Islamic state and he ruled under the Sharia, they'll be crossed off the map. No one will want to try to annex it because they're already under the Sharia. There would be, the insurgencies would stop. You see the picture, brothers and sisters. Why the jihad now is by the sword and is offensive, because they've lived under democratic ways and means. They're tired of it. It doesn't work. And now the democratic ways and means are killing the Fula. They're killing the Tuareg. They're killing the Mandinka. They're killing the Arab, the Afro-Arabs. This is all under democratic ways and means. They said enough is enough. And so they are saying, we're going to go on an offensive jihad and we're going to start trying to take territories. This is why this situation, brothers and sisters, is complex and everything. The granddaddy of the modern day insurgencies by the sword, by the Muslims, was the 9/11 bombings. The Americans and their Western allies formulated draconian strategy to collectively punish all Muslims. We know this to be a fact. Every Muslim leader knows this to be the fact because it caused them strife as well. The Western powers have loans. They have weapon agreements. They have other types of what we call in the Arabic language mithaq. These are special type agreements. And so they begin to call him up on it. Look, we just paid you 25 million. We want you to go after the strong Muslims, go to the masjid. We want you to close up this masjid, this masjid, this masjid, causing insurgencies in their country because they had to listen to these kuffar governments coming to tell them, now this is what we want you to do. And many of them did it. And you see the impact of that after 9/11. And to collectively punish the Muslims, wherever they may be. They want all the governments to go after the Muslims. They begin to instigate invasions of Muslim states based upon, remember, the hidden weapons of mass destruction. Poor Muslim countries now equipped with nuclear bombs. Incredible. And they pulled a fast one over the American public. And they entered, the military entered into the fray of starting to fight Muslims based upon a lie. This is why Subhanahu wa ta'ala knows them very well. He tells us in Surah 49, there's one verse in there, he says, when an evil person comes to you to give you information about something, you check it out first. Our Muslim leaders and our African leaders in particular, and those in the Jazeera Arab, those in Asia should have backed up first before they acted, but they didn't do it. They acted on their orders, and all of us are having problems everywhere. So based upon that lie, they begin to hit Iraq. They hit Afghanistan. They begin to drop bombs all over the place. Pakistan. They caused problems and instigated even more problems into Kashmir. They did all kinds of things to cause problems in the homeland of the United States. The Muslims, many traveled to go visit a relative in Libya, was denied entry. Many were arrested. They had other programs, brothers and sisters, that it's hideous, and they were being exposed. And they're still operating today against the rank and file Muslims. This is what is the contention why Muslim scholars talk against this, why they coin this Harb Salibiyya, the Crusader War. This is what this means in the Arabic language. And they begin to go after rank and file Muslims who go to the masjid, who don't do anything. They work just like any other man, irrespective if he's Christian or Jew or Juju or Ifa, make no difference. He's the same man. He goes to the market for his family. He goes out with his family. They begin to go after the rank and file and begin to punish them by calling them terrorists, co-conspirators, and all this other stuff. They initiated watchlist programs. Terror watch programs. A man go to Fajr prayer is now listed on the terror watch. Can you believe that? Because they looked at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and said that the Muslims who go to Fajr prayer and Muslim who goes to the late evening, afternoon prayer, which we call Salat al-Asr, then he's a terrorist. And so they criminalized Islam. They criminalized our Prophet ﷺ, and they got spanked for it, and they're still being spanked for it. And they're starting to suffer because subhanahu wa ta'ala, we believe this. Many in the scholarly body believe that the United States is under the divine decree. Even Christian and Jewish leaders inside the United States are saying the same thing. Also, rendition programs against the Muslims. Brothers and sisters, do you know what the rendition programs are? I know what it is. Oh yes, firsthand. The rendition programs is where they begin to try to kidnap you, or they kidnap you, or they'll put you into here black and torture, what they call black sites or torture sites to torture Muslims. All this came out. The public knows about this. They had hearings. There's movies on this. The Muslims who were involved, who escaped these things, talk about what happened to them. It's all out. All of these things I've talked about is the catalyst to what is happening on our continent today. And many of these black sites were on the continent where they come and torture Muslims. This rendition program I'm talking about here, and then the I forgot what they call that now. Extraordinary rendition is where they get you and throw you in Sahara Desert. You're at 30,000 feet, they drop you. Or they drop you in the Atlantic. Or they take you in a boat and tie you up, put weights on you, and drop you in the ocean. These are rendition programs that I'm talking about. It's all out. There's lawsuits where Muslims has disappeared. Their families have sued the U.S. government. And all of this is, many people don't know about this, but they hear, but they don't want to hear about it because they have family problems. But these problems here, brothers and sisters, is causing insurgencies. And I can see in time, if this thing grows, American troops will be coming into Africa to fight. And that means black and brown faces will be at the forefront to fight their African brothers. To bring them to what? What you want to fight them to bring them to what? We live here in Africa under, our way of life. We can't live the way you live in the United States. It's a totally different environment. We have different morals. We have different governance. We are different people. So I hope you get my picture, because I'm talking frankly with you, brothers and sisters, about this, to give you an understanding why we have this insurgency. Because I'm talking against the West today. 2 weeks ago, I talked about the Mujahideen, what they are doing wrong, and why they should stop doing certain things. I talked about this, how they violated the Sunnah of the Prophet, ﷺ, how they violated the Sharia of Allah Ta'ala. I talked about those things for weeks. But now I've been concentrating on the West because we have two wrongs. And then these two don't make a right. Okay? The Mujahideen who will fight to protect the villages are right. But when they go to kidnap their brothers, wives and daughters and so forth in retaliation and revenge, it becomes criminal. So the grave mistake is the catalyst to the modern day insurgency that we have. These are Islamic insurgencies now with the sword, brothers and sisters, with the sword. These are with the sword, brothers and sisters. That's right. It's offensive now. Our most learned statesmen should understand the Mujahideen and what they are, and they have to understand some of the basic elements of Islam, the Sharia, to understand in order to help to bring peace. You cannot use the Western model to quell this insurgency, because the Muslims here are going by the Quran and by the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You have to have people who understand that, and we do have it. But the minute our brilliant scholars get involved, they get arrested. They get involved to stop this. They get put on terror watch lists. They can even leave their towns. Or some ethnic groups who are in favor with the West now go to threaten some of our brilliant statesmen. And one in particular, I talked about Sheikh Gumi of Nigeria, northern Nigeria. He helped to bring some of these new fledgling groups who are now involved in criminal activity. He got them, and because they were saying they're operating under the Sharia and the Sunnah of the Prophet, Islam, he showed the error in their ways, they stopped. And after that, he came under death threats. Even so, the one big ethnic group in the South, the Igbo people, wanted him dead and wanted him brought into custody where he'd be tortured in Abuja. You see, I'm spilling this all out. Just because this man was stopping the Mujahideen from doing what they were doing, he was stopped from doing it. You have to have Islamic scholars, judges, and so forth, and intellectuals involved in this, brothers and sisters. That's right. You can't keep loading the area and trying to bring the Tubab in here. They don't want them. They're not Muslims. They're part of the problem, and that's why you can't get them to the table, because they don't want to listen what the Kuffar has to say, because the Kuffar is behind their troubles in Africa. You see what I'm talking about? Removing strong, devout Muslims, this is one of the things too. The terror programs that the Americans instituted in Africa in particular, I'm not talking about Jazeera Arab, they did this in Turkey and other places. I'm not concentrating on them. That's not my homeland. My homeland is here in Africa. I'm talking about the problems here. Yes, I'm concerned about the Muslims elsewhere in Pakistan, Kashmir, India, yes, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Chechnya. Yes, I'm concerned about them. But I have to talk about the African model, because this is where I live, and this is the most misunderstood. And it's been for 400 years. From the time when the Americans said that the reason why they were coming here to do it, because we were black folk, black monkeys jumping from trees, eating bananas. So they had to colonize us. They had to bring us to the Americas because we had no civilizations here. We've listened to this type of talk for 400 years. So I want to talk to clear this up. We're not monkeys jumping from trees. We had sultanates. We had other empires that weren't Muslim. We had the Ghana. We had many different powerful, the Asante people in Ghana. They had powerful kingdoms way before the Tuba came around. See? So this war on terror began in earnest to start the modern day insurgencies, because they begin to go after Muslims everywhere. Kashmir, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Jazeera Arab, Africa, America, the West Indies, South America. The same program spread across. They begin to go after Muslims. They question their integrity. They questioned that they were in Brazil. They questioned that they were really Brazilian. He says, you can't be, their thing is, you can't be Muslim and American. You cannot be Muslim and European. You cannot be Muslim and African. You had to be along with them. Just like, remember, ex-President Bush said, you either with us or for us. So that means I had to vacate what I am in order to be what? A pseudo-tuba. I wouldn't do it. And many of us will not do it and have not done it. But we have turncoats. We understand that. But again, this is a catalyst. And these strong Muslims were replaced by stool pigeons, turncoats, and modernists and secularists that you see today. Why we have the trouble, especially here on this continent. They are governed mainly by stool pigeons today, turncoats, modernists, and secularists. And they're all doing the bidding of the Western governments. You see this big disconnect, and you have the people here. The people are suffering across this continent. The Tuba, who has the power, if they were right, if they had the right moral structure, they say they're Christians. Why don't they use Jesus' Islam's model. They should be operating under the Torah because they are Christians. They don't use the Torah. They don't use any Sharia except what they make up. So they empower these people who themselves hate Muslims and hate Islam. And they go after us. They go after us a lot, brothers and sisters. And they have been devastating in the Muslim community. And this is what has been the catalyst. This is why when these leaders are then forced to try to go to the table with the Mujahideen, they don't want to see them because they know they're stool pigeons. They know them to be turncoats. They know them to be modernists and secularists. They can't talk to them. They don't want to deal with them because they know what they are. That's why this problem, brothers and sisters, is so complex and it's very, very heated. It's incendiary. You got hardened Muslims and you bring in a kafir to come to talk to hardened Muslims who are going by the Quran and the Sunnah. It doesn't make sense. You don't send the Mujahideen leaders, you don't send the ulama and fuqaha to the United States to talk to their people over there. Why? Because they're operating on another governance. You don't send that. We know that. We don't send that. We send people similar to them so that way they can listen. This is what I'm saying to them. Why don't they send people who are like us, who go by the Quran, who go by the Sunnah, and those who are fighting in the desert? I'm not talking about the rank and file black man, Muslim, Afro-Arab. I'm talking about him. I'm talking about the Mujahideen groups now. You need to bring people similar to them, meaning in faith and conviction in Islam, in order to quell this violence. You can't bring modernist Muslims, so-called modernist and secularist Muslims, to the table. It's not going to work. It won't work, brothers and sisters. They will shoot them before they would do anything else. This is how volatile it is because they've been killed enough and harmed enough and their families taken, and now there's no more talking. Now it's offensive jihad. And this is what's happened, brothers and sisters. And I'm giving it to you straight so that way you can understand what's going on. Yes, they'll say this is terrorism here. They'll say that I'm advocating terrorism. I'm not advocating anything. Why should I have to? Even if I talk, I don't talk. Even if I talk or don't talk, what do I have to do with this? I have nothing. I'm not adding to this. These people here, as I speak now, are spreading and going through Africa like a hot knife through butter. I have nothing to do with that. So for them to label me as part of this is almost laughable because I have nothing to do with that. It's their making to make this. I didn't make this. Nor did my brothers in the fuqaha and ulama. They didn't make this situation happen. It's their causing, the West, and bringing in these people here to govern. And this is why we have this problem. These situations drove these groups underground, brothers and sisters. And when they went underground, they began to smolder. The African states, on behalf of Western powers, began killing wholesale Muslims. And it's true. They began killing Muslims all over the place. They're still doing it now. These security forces, militias are killing, especially the Tuareg. They're killing the Fula people a lot. And the Arabs also. And nobody's taking them to task for it. So this is a problem. And they have to stop that. The offensive. Many of them arrived home from Jazeera Arab. This is also a bad situation. When the African Islamic insurgencies began to rev up, it came at a time when Jazeera Arab was hot. The West was in there. The European powers were there to quell the taking over of the infamous Islamic group and some of the other groups there. Remember that. Remember something. There was many African fighters there. Remember that? When that broke up, what did they do? They came back home. Now they're seasoned, hardened Muslim soldiers. And when they were pushed, their tolerance level was very short. They began to formulate Mujahideen groups. This is another element, brothers and sisters, that we talk about here now. See, this is another element. They left Jazeera Arab. For those who don't know, again, that's the Middle East. Okay, Jazeera Arab is the Middle East. This is what we call that. And there's also other names, Hijaz, but as I'm talking about the whole region, Jazeera Arab. They came from that region back into Africa, into Libya. They came back to the Sahel region. So when it's time for this offensive jihad, they were already ready because they have already been battle tested there in Jazeera Arab. This is how complex this situation is, brothers and sisters. And I'm giving you firsthand accounts on what is happening, how it's seen from an Islamic point of view, not from the West, from an Islamic point of view. So the current situation is driven by many factors we talked about. Ethnic strife add to this. The lack of security, joblessness, all this type of stuff. Anti-Islamic officials who want to stamp out Islam. All of these things here is adding to this situation. The African Muslims, as the Western powers clamp down on the stronghold of Muslim states, the African states with large Muslim populations, they're turned into murder. Now, they went from a stage from interdiction of Muslims to murder. This is what has happened. You see in the Sahel. They were now equipped to murder, and they were paid. You know what has happened. As we talked about before, you know what has happened here. They were equipped and they were trained and armed by none less by Uncle Sam in the United States, who admits now and been called to task that they're training these type of people to do this murder and to take over our governments. Any African leader today who sits with them, you have to wonder behind your back if they're plotting to put coup leaders to take over your country. So this is a big situation, and it's only getting worse. Then violence erupt. Upstart and ragtag Muslim groups begin to erupt. 20 of them are here, 50 of them here, 100 of them over here. And then some got funding and they became 500. Some became 1,000 or more, you see? And then they begin to do their things. And like in northern Nigeria, the Tuareg, all of these things here cause the present-day insurgency, the Tuareg in Mali and so forth and so on, turning out, burning out Fulani communities by rogue security forces and militias. Brothers and sisters, there's a lot of wrongs here. There's a lot of wrongs, okay? And we have to bring good, outstanding people to come to stop this, to help to quell this. We have to come up with innovative ideas in order to help to bring peace to our continent. We want this. I want this. Most all of us here in Africa, we want peace. We want to see peace. We want to see prosperity. We want jobs. We want a livelihood. We want to be able to enjoy what Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has given us. Africa is a beautiful place. We have all the resources here. We don't need Europe. We don't need to go to Asia or any other place. Africa has it all. Vast valleys, mountain ranges. All the food you could think of is grown. You heard me many times talk about Al-Maghrib, where I live. We're a small country. But the abundance of food here, brothers and sisters, is astonishing. The abundance of food here is astonishing. Apples, oranges, cherries, onions, potatoes, watermelon, melons, bitter lemon, bitter melon. We have different type of orange types here. We have one big orange tree that grows everywhere here. I mean, you minute you put it in the ground, it just skyrocket. And the oranges are massive, and they kind of have a sour, sweet taste to it, but it's very medicinal. You take this thing and you start to drink this, it helps to eliminate many viruses in the body. And they have big oranges, and the trees grow in feet, about 30 feet up. Some grow 40 feet up, and he dropped a lot of oranges, and they're massive. And the fruit inside is like a orange red, like some of the grapefruits that I see inside the United States. And it's in between pomelos and like orange. And this juice is delicious. It's sour sweet, but it's very healthy for you. Cholesterol and everything. You see what I'm talking about? We have all of this here in Africa. We don't need to go to Europe and take anything from them or any other place. We have everything. Cocoa. Everybody, I lived in America 50 years. I was born there. You know, candy and cocoa drinks, we have that here. We have that. We have the origination of where the cocoa right here in West Africa. See? So we don't need that. Now, this, as you heard me say now for a long time here on this, I'm talking a lot today. I'm going to cover this to the end and then I'll get off. This gave rise, everything the aforementioned gave rise to the incendiary insurgencies that I shown in the map, brothers and sisters. All what you heard me speak now for almost an hour is giving rise to what you see now. Maybe 6 months and a year from now, I have to draw another map. You'll see it far more red in there. And you may see the fruition of a new Islamic emirate that's been declared by maybe 3 groups. The Tuareg, the Arab, and the Fulani groups may declare this an emirate. This in the green. We don't know what's going to happen in Libya because Libya is marred in all kinds of stuff. And now Sudan has erupted again as well. But the other states like Almagra, where I live, they are concerned because we live on the African continent and our government is concerned. And even the chief of our security forces here is even concerned. He talked about the volatile nature of the Sahel. So we are watching. We're watching what's happening in the Sahel region. We're not letting this go. Everybody again is looking to find a way to quell the violence and to stop it because it's going to graduate into other things. The new Islamic emirate will be taken by the sword. If not by peaceful means, remember what I told you before. I advocated this stretch here, Niger and Burkina Faso. You say, why? I'll tell you again. The Mujahideen are already there, brothers and sisters. They got vast territories already in Burkina Faso and in Niger. They're already there. So we might as well give it to them. And then tell the other Mujahideen groups who say, hey, look, we want to leave and we want to live under the Sharia. Now you have your own place and it's massive. This is a large parts of land. And they can hold all the Mujahideen groups that are all through Africa. And they can come to live in an Islamic emirate which is governed by Muslims and under the Sharia law. Outside the Sahel region, failed and draconian policy designed to stop the growth of Islam. The Americans in particular and the West is involved in this, trying to quell again, you have peaceful means. You have Muslims who make what we call dawah invitation. They're not terrorists. They're not criminals. They're not trying to do anything. They don't harm anybody. They don't carry guns. They don't hurt nobody. They only preach the religion and people coming to Islam. The West tries to stop that. See, because as you see, the Islamization of Africa is now going. It's going to happen. Either you let it be peaceful by invitation, or it's going to be by the sword. We don't have a choice here in Africa no more. Because of the draconian ways what the West have done and our African leaders who sided with them has caused this situation. And now we have a Islamization of Africa, maybe taken by the sword. That's right. Maybe taken by the sword. And so all of this stuff here has backfired, as you know now. The African governments have to spend money to equip and get loans to equip their people to fight the insurgencies. We just don't have the money for that. The resources that we should be using to empower our people are being taken out by the West. And I wanted to open up, I wanted a map I wanted to show you. We all know what's happening the resources. They've been taken out. So we have to take predator loans from the West in order to build our armies and our security forces. And we can't pay these loans back. This is why I said, brothers and sisters, this is a very, very, very heart-drenching situation. Even to talk about it is very hurtful. I'm getting close to closing here. You know, our esteemed ambassador, Abdullah bin Dawa, he's got a series of things talking about. You guys, I wish you would subscribe to him on Facebook. This brother is on it, and his staff is on it. They give you a ground-eye view on what's happening, the insurgencies, economic matters, and so forth, security matters. It's good. It's almost like a Forbes, like they have in the United States. It's like the Forbes type situation, because you get the background. And even the African Americans in the United States, you should be looking at his programs. Why? And reading what he's writing, because for you say, look, I'm tired of America. I want to come to live in Africa. Where do you want to live here in Africa? You should know what's happening on the ground. Don't make the mistake in flying in the plane. You fly into Niger and you come across Mujahideen Fisibilillah, and you're going to be shocked. See? So you should have the basis in understanding what's going on in the continent. You following the ambassador and his staff. Then you'll be able to get a better bird's eye view on what's happening, so you'll know which country you should go to. Busted corrupt officials hoarding out African riches. This is a catalyst. The Western governments, banks, they put the riches that are richest into these banks. Then, many centuries, the Western powers who traffic slaves, I know that, my ancestors, okay, and hoarded out minerals and so forth and became rich. France, what did they do in Mali? They took gold to empower and enrich their country. Most of Western Europe was built upon Africa, the wealth we had here, and they took this wealth and they made it on their own and became powers because of it, and they still take today. The Western powers insist that our leaders use Muslims as whipping boys and scapegoats. Every problem that happens in a country, they want to say the Muslims are the catalyst to it. Drug dealing, robbing, stealing, they say the Muslims are the catalyst. So they go after the scholars. I don't know any scholar anywhere, Muslim scholar in particular, who goes out in the street 10 o'clock at night and starts robbing people. But he's arrested. And they try to tie them to it, and they'll say, oh, yeah, you the imam of this masjid. Well, you know, this guy here, I saw him praying in your masjid, so you had to know what he was doing at nighttime. So they arrest you. See, this is not happening on Maghreb, but it's happening in other places, brothers and sisters, okay? I'm telling you right now, it's happening like this. This is the crux of it here. Because of the size and the magnitude of Africa, 3.5 times bigger than the United States, the selected geographical locations of the Islamic insurgencies present a clear and present danger to Africa and its security and well-being. Brothers and sisters, that is in a nutshell right there. The jihad taken by the sword is a problem, because the Western governments will go after the soft target Muslims, like the Fulani villages, and begin to kill them, as they're doing now, burning them out because of this jihad. This is what makes why, in some ways, it's I'm not saying it's comical, it is not. These governments, since they can't whip the Mujahideen, they go after soft target Muslims, and they create manufacture all kinds of things against them. And you see them inside prisons all over the place in the Muslim world. And these guys are not mujahideen. But the mujahideen they should be fighting, they can't beat them, so they go after other. That's why I said collective punishment of Muslims. Mujahideen groups right here. Why don't the West go engage them one-on-one? When they have what has happened here in Niger and Burkina Faso, they thought, well, hey, these are black folks, stupid, ignorant, Fulani and so forth, Tuareg. What happened? They found many of them to be great generals and strategists and so forth, and they got ambushed, because they were arrogant. Khalid, remember Saifullah? Okay, what he said? What did he say about it? He said, never underestimate your enemy. You learn them and their history. You study them. Americans didn't want to do that because of their concept of racism. They have white, they're white. So they said, hey, you know what? Oh man, these are black folk. They don't know anything. We just march in here in Niger and they got ambushed and we lost soldiers there. The French talk crazy. They got spanked and now basically driven out of Mali. See? So, brothers and sisters, everywhere we turn, this is a serious problem. The Western powers cannot defeat these groups. The size of Africa is so much. They don't have the money. Yes, they're rich. They're going to have to do something. They're going to have to use black faces to do the fighting for them. And this is where the tragedy will begin. The African leaders invested in Western power schemes are fighting smoldering fires in their backyards. They have even other problems, economic problems that's driving to people to do things inside their countries. They don't have time now to fight mujahideen motivated soldiers. See, because we have problems already, economics, joblessness, injustices, all of that. And then now you got to go to fight mujahideen too. It's very difficult. So, brothers and sisters, in essence, the mujahideen groups and their insurgencies came at the wrong time for our fledgling African governments because they're fighting. We have mass migration into Europe. You know the story. Tragic. You have the corruption. You have joblessness, insecurity. You have all of this. And then they're waiting on the Western powers, their masters, who have no clue in stopping these insurgencies. This is why this thing is growing, brothers and sisters. This is why this situation here is growing, because they're waiting on answers from the West to quell this Islamic insurgencies. And again, I will get ready to close. You cannot stop an Islamic insurgency using the kuffar. You cannot. It doesn't work. These people operate. Yes, it worked. Remember what Subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran? Remember what I talked about this? I gave tafsir about this one verse in the Quran. I won't get into that. I've already talked about it. Subhanahu wa ta'ala said, yeah, the kuffar will have victories here and there. They have some victories in the Zir Ar, but they didn't take out Islam. It kept growing. And even though they took out this famous group and groups there in Zir Ar, look what's happened in Africa. It's skyrocketed. See, so you have to look at this for what it is. And the magnitude of Africa is so massive, so large, and the insurgencies are so great. We'll be back here talking about this again, and maybe another map will show more red, and even probably fruition, one in green. And the yellow will become darker towards, it's almost red because of the killings and because of the sword being used to take over some of these countries. Brothers and sisters, this is a serious, serious situation. And I hope I didn't bore you today, but this is for those who want to understand what's happening on our continent. And I gave it to you today. So that way you start doing your research. If you're interested in this, and you can start, a lot of people may not be interested because I understand they're worried about their food and so forth and so on, how they're going to find jobs, especially in the West. Perhaps this won't be reviewed here for a couple of years. We don't know. Maybe not even by my lifetime. I don't know. But I gave it to you so you'll have the ammunition and history behind it to understand. And then you'll remember these things that I talked about today. And hopefully, my brothers and sisters, we can come up to a solution that we can see Africa in its greatness. And we can survive here, we can prosper here, we can live here, and we can die in our own land without any bloodshed. But we know that our Prophet ﷺ said that the whole world will be under Islamic banner. And we know it's coming to that. We know this, but not today. So these insurgencies, that's what I said before, are not at the right time now, brothers and sisters. But they are here. We have to deal with them. And again, you cannot deal with a great Islamic insurgency as big as this using the kuffar. It doesn't work. Look what happened in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, you see what has happened? It didn't work. The American government tried to use modernists and secularists to quell the Mujahideen soldiers there, the Taliban. Remember that? It didn't work. They didn't deal with them at all. They bypassed them and dealt directly with the kuffar, with the Americans, and then what? They won. So we have to change our methods to deal with these guys. We bring their leadership to the table. They need to see Muslim scholars and judges and faqirs and so forth that they respect at the other side of the table. That's what they need to see. And they can listen to them because they know who they are. They respect them because why? They're bona fide Muslim scholars, judges, and intellectuals, imams, and so forth and so on, from a variety of different places. They come at the table, the Mujahideen soldiers, the leadership of these groups automatically will respect them because when they know it's the time for the Adhan, everybody's going to go pray. When they start talking about the Quran and Sunnah, the scholars, the judges, they're already equipped with the Quran and Sunnah. They already know it, you see? So they can talk to them in such a way that the kuffar cannot talk to them. So I gave you all this today, my brother, sister. It was long. Please forgive me for that. But I wanted to get this out to you. And hopefully, as we speak, we pray that our continent here will be in peace. And our Muslim brothers who have taken to the sword, please, I'll stop at that because I don't want to say more than that because as my brother told me here recently, Fulani brother told me, he said, what would you do? Yeah. Your village has been burned. My village has been burnt out. And these guys have killed many of us. I escaped. So what am I supposed to do? You see, he put that to me. So he's telling me, he said, well, why are you telling me don't join these groups? Who's going to protect me? You see how complicated the situation is, brothers and sisters. So I'll leave you with that, with those solemn words from my brother, my fuller brother who told me this. Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullahi.